Yeah, so next is our keynote, and that is John Fillwalk, who, as he mentioned, is from Ball State University and runs the Digital Intermedia Arts Lab and has been doing art and the merging of art and virtual reality and probably other media as well, I imagine, and displaying it all around the world. And he's going to talk to us about exploring spatialized media experiences. So a lot of his experiences at doing those presentations and at Ball State and running his lab. Mostly we're going to be running off the laptop at the podium, but John's got a special case. He's going to get to use his own laptop. So we're going to switch over laptops and then get started.
Great, well, thank you. Good morning. Thanks to Bill for the invite and the committee. And I'm very happy to be aware of this group. I'd like to come in the future as well. So it was also interesting to hear the diversity of interest in VR across discipline. That's something that that's kind of our niche in a sense, is that we've developed methods of approaching various disciplines, understanding their needs, vocabularies, that kind of thing. I myself come out of an art background, so I was in painting and photography, and then in the mid-90s discovered a guy named Carl Loeffler, who was at Carnegie Mellon, and really turned me on to the potential of VR. And so over the decades, we've been exploring those approaches, both screen-based and, more recently, the consumer HMD, that kind of thing. We also get into multi-user virtual worlds and augmented reality and all of that. So I'll show you some approaches that we've taken to projects across disciplines. So we're fairly agnostic in terms of how we work with our clients. We did get our start from Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical. They incubated us to start something up at Ball State maybe 13, 14 years ago. And then we had the opportunity to really make it on our own. So we're essentially like a little business in terms of how we work with the outside world. All of our funding is soft money that I bring in through contracts and that kind of thing. So, which is a challenge sometimes in the humanities, as you know. So, but we do work quite a bit with sciences and such. So I will take you through some of the recent projects. And basically what I'm going to do here is a survey through some of the work over the years that we've been involved in. So this is our website, just idialab.org. One of the first things you see here is Dr. Bernie Fisher, who's an IU professor, archaeoinformatics or infoarchaeology, or however you want to say that. But he has a program here, a new doctoral program, really exploring the intersections of archaeology and digital methodologies. So I'll talk about a few of his projects that we currently are working on, and over the years, probably about 10 years, we've been working with Bernie. So this is a place to explore, but let me just kind of jump in here. And I'm sorry about that. Let's see, can we turn it down? Yeah. Actually, we can turn it off. We don't really need that music. No. All right, great. So this reel, I'll stop it a little bit, but this shows some of our work over the years. This has been a few History Channel episodes. We worked a lot with archaeologists in interpreting the past, developed a particular niche in celestial alignments in archaeological monuments and sites across the world. So worked in sites from Stonehenge to Mayan sites to all sorts of things. So this is an example of something that we did for the History Channel's Universe series. So we did 2 episodes on that. That was all rendered out of Maya and Vue. I'll talk about tools here because I know you guys are interested in that too. And we no longer use Vue for landscape generation output. We use something called Terragen, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. We've transitioned over to that. This is a demo we did for Smithsonian Air and Space, their Milestones of Flight exhibit, thinking about, again, not really gamifying, but creating these immersive, almost kind of flight simulator and teaching, learning, interpretation kind of experiences for exhibits in the installation. So this is, when you first come into the big Air and Space Museum off the mall, they have a number of spacecraft and historic airplanes. Actually, Wright Flyer is not in that exhibit, but we put it in here anyway. Made it fly a little higher than it probably did. Apollo 11, we work a lot with space, and I'll show you some of that more recent over the summer for the 50th anniversary of the landing. But that was, again, for Smithsonian. This is back to History Channel. We work a lot with ancient Rome. Romans were very interested in the use of celestial alignments to convey significance to a certain site or building. So we're discovering that, sometimes proving it, sometimes disproving certain alignments. Earth has a wobble to it, so we use this data from NASA's JPL laboratory to accurately reposition the stars, the visible planets, the moon, the sun. And again, that was a Universe Series episode. This is a touch experience that we did for Boston Museum of Science. While you're waiting, queued up to go see the planetarium, it's a little experience where you can learn about the solar system. In this particular demo, we showed the orbits of the moons of Jupiter, which I think at this point we had 67 moons tracked with actual. The data is good here. These are the orbits of the 67 moons. I think they've discovered more since then. Then we have the 4 Galilean moons that we allow kind of touch experiences with. But again, just something really to kind of occupy yourself while you're queued up in line. So here's a project that we've worked with Bernie on, and this is the Meridian Augusti project, which is the largest sun calendar of the ancient world. That hesitate to call it a clock. It's not a sundial in the typical sense because it's more of a seasonal instrument. So, but it really is a scientific instrument, and it really was. Most of it is now, like 99% of it is buried under modern Rome. So it's very difficult to extrapolate what it actually did. There was a small excavation that was done in the 80s that gave us some information on what functionality it must have had. And again, using this NASA data, that we were able to extrapolate actually the expanse of the instrument itself. This particular simulation, so this is kind of a white model simulation looking at shadowing. So the main thing here is to be able to control certain parameters of the sun in this case. We're not looking at any lunar alignments, but we wanted to develop a tool for discovery. So this is actually, right now we're working, actually in Wyoming, we're doing a few projects, one with the Bighorn Medicine Wheel. I was just up there recently. And so, but this, what's known is actually, let's see if it shows up here in the video. Yeah, you can kind of see it down here. It's kind of hard to see. It sort of looks like a T shape, but that's the actual exposed portion of the excavation that was created in the 80s. And there's alignments that should go over to the Arapagus, which is now in a different museum across Rome. The obelisk was fallen in ancient days, and in the 1700s or so, it was moved to a different piazza. So the whole thing is a mess, and it's underneath, like I said, about 15 feet of modern Rome above it. So in trying to understand whether the alignments acknowledge certain important dates in the Julian calendar, we're doing that all through the simulation, through the math side of it, and essentially the shadowing. So to me, this was important. I really like this project, and we're continuing to work on it right now, actually. And there's a new publication we're working on. We just did a new version of the simulation. But looking at all sorts of competing theories too. One of the great things about a simulation like this is you can support all interpretations. So there are no longer kind of dominant theories of what the site must have looked like, but also surveys and satellite maps and that kind of thing. This project, again, looking at the Mayan site, Chichén Itzá, looking at the ball court, solar alignments with the ball court, also looking at restorations of the polychromy on the site. Here we're playing with, at this point we're working in Cryengine, which the game Crisis is built on. So we no longer really work directly with that. I'll talk about that a little bit. But we did just some kind of fun environmental things as well as more scientific, simulation-oriented, again, kind of building a tool for discovery and looking at certain alignments. Bringing the monument through its different phases. We've done a few different simulations with Stonehenge, both Unity-based and Cryengine-based. We worked with David Pearson's interpretation of the monument, who's the most prominent scholar dealing with Stonehenge today. We do a lot with museum, or helping museum interpretation kind of problems. Any kind of pre-modern sculpture in particular, or pre-modern object for that matter, was never really meant to be in a museum. So reestablishing lost context is important to us. So at this point we're laser scanning objects. We no longer do that. We use photogrammetry. But at this point it is a Faro laser scanner, and then building a typical, it's unknown what temple complex this object was in, but it was part of and what was important in coming to venerate here was that really the experience of getting there as well. Sometimes these temples were remote and took several days to get to, that sort of thing. So we're trying to kind of give the viewer a sense of that. It's another short reel. Again, back to Rome. This is also with Cryengine. I should point out here too that this is, it's not like Cryengine, but it's a multi-user virtual world platform that was built on top of Cryengine. It's called Blue Mars, and it didn't really succeed. It was sort of intended to be a post-Second Life kind of more serious, scholarly even, virtual world that was intended to replace things like Second Life. And it was created by a fellow named Hank Rogers, who we've continued to work with. He did gift the technology in a non-commercial sense to us. So we're, I think, probably the only developers for Blue Mars at this point. But I use it occasionally, but this has also shifted. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but their arc has kind of shifted in their development with the product. But here we're using it. It's a beautiful, Cryengine's a beautiful engine. It had many, many years on other environments at the time. At this point, Unity did not look very compelling, and it had a real advantage visually. So we built a lot of experiences in that. This was a commission we did up in Michigan, East Lansing, for the Zaha Hadid Broad Museum that's up there. And they came to us and they wanted a advanced experience of the museum before it was built. And like any Hadid project, it was over budget and over schedule and things like that. So they wanted to kind of get things going and get people in kind of both to experience the space, but also they allowed us to create virtual artworks for the experience as well. So we had a lot of fun with that. We're kind of regarding or disregarding the museum in different ways, but very participatory experiences where the user really creates the art. This is something, actually I met Bill here, this was in Arles, but we did there was a 3D UI conference that we created a virtual musical instrument for, and at the time, it was kind of now it's fairly commonplace, but we put the lead motion up in front of the Oculus and created an instrument around that. essentially almost like a xylophone, but it was pretty sophisticated. You could shift scales and all of that. So this is a humanities project where they're studying kind of worker conditions, a little bit of manufacturing techniques of a glass factory, 1910, 1920, so in that range. We were using different techniques to explore how to integrate kind of rich media, data, objects into the experience. So prototyping different ways to interact with content. So sometimes a video play, sometimes it might be some oral history, might be textual, might be a 3D object, different ways to engage content in a learning environment, kind of like a living history museum, Colonial Williamsburg, something like that. There was actually a 3D docent who greeted you, who had some bot technology that drove him. We do a lot too with leveraging 3D environments, connecting to databases. So thinking about 3D worlds as almost a portal to rich data experiences. So, you know, we obviously live in a three-dimensional world, but most of the time we're engaging with flat content. So how do we think about that more dimensionally as we move forward? This was, let's see here. I'll show this, I think this looks like it's lower res, but this was a piece we showed in Mumbai at the Indian Institute of Technology, back to more of a cave setup. And so it didn't have a floor, but it was a three-sided cave using flickr. This is just a pre-visualization of it, but it was using flickr as the foundation for an immersive, interactive experience with images. So you could come up and basically, we use the Flickr API to go through public folders on Flickr, and so you could come in and type flowers, and all of a sudden you'd be surrounded by flowers. And you also expose I think the 20 most popular tags for those images too, so you could do subsequent follow-up experiences as well. And then when these images instantiated, you were surrounded in a 4.1 kind of a swirling sonic environment as well. So that, at the time we didn't have a cave. This was kind of just kind of a homegrown solution. We do now have a cave, and we wanted something a little different so than a traditional, kind of more cubic oriented cave. And we do have your projectors over there. So we worked with a company called the Illuminati out of Milwaukee, I think. And we worked with them to design a custom system for us. And we wanted what they call a cyclorama, but we wanted a seamless section of a sphere. So it's a spherical experience. Essentially, your eye height is about halfway through the curve of the sphere. And so it's a 270-degree cut. There's a 90-degree opening. Obviously, it's missing its top and bottom. And then there's two 4K E-Vision projectors with a blending point, about midway. And then we have a Genelec sound system that immerses you in an ambisonic, cubic ambisonic environment. But I just thought I'd throw this in there to show you what, this is relatively new for us. This is maybe within the last year or so we have this. So it's about 8K, it's almost 8K of pixels around. If there were 360 degrees, there'd be about 12K of pixels. So when we compose for it, we're thinking in like 12K space. So 2K high, 12K around, and then an 8K slice at any moment. So we're having fun with it. Work with Adam Wales and on setting this up. Donardo came out, and you probably know those guys, I'm guessing. So this showed some different options that they were doing for us at the time. Okay. This project is a mashup piece we did for some open source software that we wrote called atksharp, which is essentially audio toolkit for Unity. There's a GitHub repository for that, and anybody can grab it. But it's essentially a synthesis environment for Unity. So instead of like a game, let's say instead of looping water sound or something like that, you can synthesize water sound. So that way it doesn't take up any space. And so anything like campfires, crickets, any kind of repetitive sound like that, that's more textural, can be synthesized instead of sampled. So we did some, this is the first time we created this into more of an art project, but it's essentially just a fun mashup project. We like to think about these sorts of things, but we're essentially looking through locative data. This was proposed for, what's the big thing outside of Laval Virtual. We didn't get in, but the proposal was for Laval. And so I think this shows, we're looking at French tweets at the time. We harvest the tweets based on location. Then we do the flickr business that I talked about through the API. And that all comes together. And then in a fun additive, for a while you can see distinct images, but what will happen eventually is it becomes a very rich, painterly, abstract experience. But it's loaded with context. So it's interesting to see, like when we first showed this, we did it in LA and during the Brett Kavanaugh thing. So all the stuff about Brett Kavanaugh was there. It's quite interesting to see the images develop. And then also the sound the synthesis is informed by looking at RGB values as it assembles itself. It's actually looking at the image to create the sound. It's synthesizing that live. Here's a few shots of our cave, the way it's installed. I know it's technically not a cave, but cyclorama, I guess. And this shows a little bit of what that experience is like. Let me zip around here a little bit. Had an interface. It also works in the headset, so we had it so you can put the Oculus on. This is a bit on atksharp, and again, this is up on the Unity store, so if anybody's interested in that, that is available, open source. We also, we have 2 planetariums at Ball State. One is our main production, or our main public planetarium. We have a smaller one. We kept the older planetarium as a production studio. So we developed fulldome content there. And so, we've done things for Houston Planetarium and Evans and Sutherland and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. This is actually right now showing a Celtic origins of Halloween show that we did. But we do a lot with the celestial alignment work that we do, of course. So here's the Pantheon. Here's a, what do you call it? Wormhole. Sort of based off the, I can't think of that sci-fi movie. What was that movie? Yes, Interstellar. So it's based off their interpretation. They worked with a physicist imagining that. So there's some excerpts from that. A few years back, we worked with a consortium of King's College, Trinity College, UCLA, UVA, probably forgetting someone. But it was funded by Mellon Foundation, and they wanted to create a virtual humanities consortium and create an open source platform, essentially, for digital humanities to explore virtual worlds to help solve problems within the humanities. And so they came to us and wanted us to develop that for them. We did base it on Unity, which of course isn't open source, but the code, all the middleware and other code that we developed in the lab is open, and that also is up on a GitHub repository, and anybody could play with that. But it was a multi-user environment, and so we did things for them, really custom things specific to their projects. There was a project on Lhasa, and again, Bernie Fischer from IU is part of this too. That was Chris Johansson in UCLA, the Rome Lab project. So, and Battle of Mount Street Bridge as well. So we helped them solve specific problems per their project, but then also tried to, and also created a more generic platform that anybody could use. So that's something that's out there. Let's see. So a little more contemporary multi-user virtual worlds. We played a little bit with high fidelity. You have a few things up there. This is Sansar, which is sort of the Second Life 2.0. It's quite a beautiful environment, but we do have some work. I'm not sure how well Sansar is catching on, but it's a it is a gorgeous environment, multi-user, and so I wouldn't say we do a lot with that, but we've created several experiences in there, just more, I would say, proof of concept or prototype, waiting to see what happens with the technology. I think it's still in beta. We built, this is a fun project that I've always wanted to do in VR, but it's Newton's Cenotaph by Boulez, an architect Boulez. It was never built. It was one of these preposterous, impossible to build architectural designs that I thought would be perfect to build in VR. So we did, and this is absolutely enormous scale where it would take too long to explain, but it's not really his tomb. It's more of a homage. It's like a mausoleum without his body, essentially, was the concept. One of the things we did a couple times is work on world spheres, which are virtual worlds in and of themselves, in a sense, because they were made out of temporary materials. And so this is a 1915 World Sphere simulation that we did. This one's in San Francisco, the Panama Pacific Exposition, which was intended to acknowledge the building of the Panama Canal, but ended up sort of being about the resurrection of San Francisco after the earthquake. So it sort of did both at the same time. And so it was, again, the scale of this was incredible. So to build out to build this in the virtual world is really kind of great to see, because you can walk in and get the scale, and it does work in head-mounted display too, multi-user, so you can bring a bunch of people in with head-mounted displays and walk around and see the World's Fair. At least a good portion. We didn't build the whole thing, but we built a good portion of it. This also shows, and then that structure, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, was rebuilt out of concrete in the 60s, but originally they built out of wood and sort of plaster lath, and it just kind of fell apart over the years, but that became a beloved, iconic piece of San Francisco, so they wanted to restore it. So in the 60s, they rebuilt it. Let's see. This is a project with Bernie Fischer, and this is still ongoing. We work with this. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site just outside of Rome, Hadrians Villa, which was kind of his Rome away from Rome. And he had built a little microcosm of all the functions of government and other niceties, I suppose. The innovative thing with this project and working with Bernie that I thought was really great is that he wanted this to be a platform for problem-based learning, where he wanted the students to learn about arts and culture and other aspects of Roman life, and they would role play how to, for instance, receive a senator who may have traveled 20 miles from Rome. They're dusty, they're tired, they're hungry. How are they received? How are they bathed? Where do they travel? Because this was a very elaborate complex based on sort of class and status. So if you're, for instance, a slave, there's a tunnel system and you're never meant to be seen. If you're the emperor, there's also sort of a tunnel system, mainly for the emperor's safety, and everybody else is kind of intermingled. So they had to understand the flows of the site spatially. So it's very interesting. And Bernie has a really nice article on spatialized learning and the role of the hippocampus and how we kind of retain experiences. So it was really fascinating to work with him on this. has really made a lot of sense to me is to, he wanted to make this as walkable as possible, and it's an enormous 300-acre site. So it was very challenging to build that with all these experiences and all that going on. But it became a labor of love, and we developed a good friendship with Bernie and Matt Brennan, who's also an IU doc student. So Matt's actually in Rome on the Rome Prize, which is a very prestigious American Academy in Rome experience for him. He's there currently. Oh, I guess I showed this a little bit. This is, again, this is the museum up in Lansing, just an empty kind of walkthrough. This is with the newer version of Unity than I guess I showed you, but just kind of relishing on all the fun stuff that it can do lighting-wise. But again, this is head-mounted display and multiplayer. Oh, and I've already shown that actually, so I don't really need to show that. This is, so we also do mobile and augmented reality projects. This was something we developed more generically. We wanted to create a locative kind of engine that we could leverage for other, well, any outdoor site. So for instance, like a battlefield, to understand the content or context there. In this case, in our own backyard, we have the Adina Hopewell, a lot of Adina Hopewell sites throughout the Ohio River Valley region. So we worked with that, again, since of our interest in celestial alignments. But we were thinking, about anything. Could be ancient Rome, could be really any kind of exterior experience. Here we do get into the alignments, but what's interesting is that when you're on site, so you're the blue dot, and it pushes you content. So if you're off site, you can work with the menu system and go through it, and well, or even you can use the menu on site as well. But if you're located on the site, it pushes you the content. It knows where you're at, which is really kind of fun on a walking tour of, maybe it's a city, or in this case, it's an exterior experience. But it knows where you're at and just pushes you the content without having to work an interface. So that's something we're looking at other heritage sites that are outside. Indoor, it's a little trickier. You have to maybe use Bluetooth, other solutions. Here we go. So in the last couple works I'll show you that are more recent from the summer, we've been working back again with Hank Rogers, who, and by the way, I should say Hank is he's the guy who brought Tetris to he didn't develop Tetris, but he made his money bringing Tetris to the world. So that's how he made his fortune. But then he's the guy who created Blue Mars. But he's also a real visionary in terms of us coming back to the moon and Mars, and very interested in all of that. He has his own habitat. There's Hank there, he's with, oh, it's hard to see. That's Buzz Aldrin. So they have a consortium. Here it is. So this is Hank's little moon habitat that he has in Hawaii. So he's on this big lava field on the Big Island. And every year they have a different mission, and usually students spend about 8 months here and look at all sorts of aspects of life in this kind of conditions. When they leave, they have to leave in spacesuits, and they're really trying to simulate, or not real spacesuits, but the equivalent of spacesuits. But they're trying to simulate all aspects of life, and so they have hydroponics and solar and all the systems they're trying to replicate to create an understanding of what's involved in these kinds of environments. And they're partnering with NASA and other international space agencies. And so what they want to do is then create a simulation of this sort of context on Mars and the moon. And so what we're doing with them is we're taking their old Blue Mars technologies that they invested in, and we're leveraging it to work with Amazon's Lumberyard. So I don't know if you know that, but that's also based on Cryengine. So Lumberyard bought a license to hack up Cryengine 3. Blue Mars was built on Cryengine 2. And so so we're doing that. So we're getting it to be a multi-user virtual world, working on that with Amazon. And so this is a video showing a crater on the south pole of the moon called Shackleton's crater. And the reason they think that perhaps we should be in a crater is because, or near a crater, is because it doesn't have the swings of day and night like other, or I should say light and shade and extreme temperature shifts. This actually is almost absolute zero down here because the sun never hits it. And it's somewhere near where the Vikram lander crashed, somewhere down there in the South Pole. But this there's just a raw kind of capture of it's kind of a little bit hard to get a sense of what's going on here, but we're in the bottom of a 20-kilometer crater and driving into, like on a rover, driving into a lava tube. So they're hoping to find a lava tube to build a habitat in, so you're protected from radiation and micrometeorites and all sorts of good things, or bad things. And so here we just did a quick little, we spent a lot of time building the cave and the lava tube, but the rover and the habitats are fairly they're kind of placeholder NASA ideas. But it's fun. So this is live out of Lumberyard, which I think was fun for us to get going. And it's also, it's based on Cryengine. It's a robust, beautiful environment. And and then the last thing I'll show you is for the 20th anniversary, this is also Lumberyard. Just a quick little Apollo 15, I should say, with the rover out of Lumberyard. And then this is not Lumberyard. This is Maya and Terrigen. But we did a promo for them for their new virtual world. We built the moon from NASA available data. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter mission, all that data is freely available. So we built the moon out of that, and then did a little portion of the journey of the Apollo 11 landing. So not the launch section, but they wanted something on the landing. And so worked with some data from Smithsonian, where they laser scanned the interior of the capsules. We built the command modules and landers and such. But this is not a live world. This is a Maya and Terrigen animation. We've also made it a HMD experience, so you can get inside the capsule and look around through the moon, which is pretty cool. That's up on Steam. And so I'll just let this play here. This was fun to do. We were rushed to get it out the door before July 20th for the anniversary, but there's sound here, but it's all chatter it's just cockpit chatter essentially, which kind of tells the story of the landing. Built the astronauts, built the character animation. It was fun. We learned a lot. Like any of these projects, we're always learning new things from all sorts of different disciplines. So it was fun to create this. This is actually also fun to do. We took the static photograph and made it into a 3D object with photogrammetry. It was just kind of a fun little detail. All the landscape generation you see there, that's Terrigen. So we used the NASA data with Terrigen to create the moon. And that's Hank. that's about it. So that's that kind of brings us up to date, at least of July, and some efforts in the lab. And so yeah, we have a few minutes for questions, I hope. And yeah.
How does your background in arts and design influence your work today, or your approach to technology?
Right. So I love solving problems. And I think, you know, obviously when people think about STEAM idea, you know, mashing up arts into the whole STEM notion, I think that's, there's a lot of validity there. I mean, I'm just, both my parents were chemists. I became an artist. I sort of just kind of was in that middle space. But yeah, starting off in painting and photography, essentially, I mean, I'm always, as much as I'm concerned about the accuracy of things, I'm also concerned about the look and feel of them. And with the audio, I didn't play the audio there, but that's a little bit kind of an emotional story that we lose when we don't have the audio. But I'm interested in experiences, so in creating those, and that is more from the art side. So leveraging, you know, what we know about science and technology through that lens, I would say. So, you know, through the lens of art. And most of our, I mean, our group is pretty art-centered, but we have people from all disciplines. So we have, you know, programmers, we have an architect, we have a composer, designers, you know, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty diverse crowd, but yeah, we're always thinking about the look of things as well.
You showed a staggering number of different over here animations. I realize it's probably difficult to generalize. Can you give an indication of the resources required to make one or two of the examples that you showed, say Stonehenge or the Hadrians Villa, in terms of people and time?
Yeah, so it varies. Well, the last piece, the lunar piece, we had to do on a very tight schedule. We did that in less than 3 months, which was difficult. Normally we have more time to do something. I would say typical project art might be something like 6 months, but in working with Bernie here at IU, we've worked with him for years on projects too. So it just depends, you know, if it's a long-term grant project that's, you know, more longitudinal, it might, yeah, it might be a couple of years. I mean, Hadrians Villa took us, I think, 2 years, and we had a team, probably maybe 3 people on it pretty regularly, and he had a part-time group of experts and consultants that were maybe about a dozen. Like he had Roman costume and Roman landscape architecture, you know, so we consulted with, so those folks were also contributing to the project. So that was a bigger project, but yeah, I'd say most of the projects tend to be about 6 months or so, somewhere in there. Right?
There's a couple more questions. While we're doing that, I'm going to switch laptops. So
Oh, yeah.
if you want to move the microphone this way.
My question is about wrangling data. I mean, that's the biggest bit of work I find that we have to do is finding good sources for stuff like the boom data or
Yeah.
Even finding good source of digital elevation maps. Like there's so many formats. Do you have a workflow that you go through and handle that?
Often the content expert that we're working in usually has an angle to help us, you know, get a focus, because we work with so many different disciplines that aren't really our core. So there's that, but we've also gotten good at just kind of sniffing at those things out too. So working with NASA is great because all that's, not all of it, I mean, most of it's publicly available.
So how big was or what format was the moon data in, and what sort of resolution? Was it 10 meter, kilometer resolution?
Yeah, so it varies on the site. Sorry, that's all right. It varied on the location. For instance, like the non-polar data, which was, there's 30-degree circle on the top and the bottom that we didn't have color data for. So the kind of the core spherical or cylindrical kind of data was, we had color data there, but not for the poles. So we had to interpolate that. So looking at, so that was a bit made up because we didn't have that data from NASA, they didn't capture it. But they did have LiDAR data, And I think you're looking at, most of that is 1 meter resolution ladder. Some of it is 5. I think it just depends on the location. Cryengine can handle much more. When we try to push it into lumberyard, since it's a live environment, it can't go anywhere near that, so it gets very generalized. We have to make up for it with things like detailed maps and other ways to fake resolution, because it tends to just get soft.
And I think we have one more question, then we'll break for break.
So you mentioned that you were using Blue Mars for your multi-user sort of implementation and the Crytek stuff.
Yeah.
Are you relying on Unity for Unity, or are you?
Yeah, we're mainly a Unity shop anymore. I would say that's our bread and butter for those sorts of applications. So.
And are you using like Photon or Unet or?
Yeah. So for the networking, we use Photon, and so yeah. So for that Melon project, we use Photon as well to do the networking. Okay. Yeah, Photon's great and can be free.
All right, great. So thank you again, John, for the presentation.